The Iliad, Chapter 8. This is on page 150 of your textbook. The Trojans mourn Hector's death and are angered that Achilles will not return his corpse. Finally, the gods order Achilles to accept Priam's ransom and surrender Hector's body. After Priam returns to Troy, the Trojans conduct a royal funeral. Hector's father and mother agonized over the death of their dearest son and his foul treatment at the hands of Achilles. Priam cried, "My friends, although you love me, let me leave the city by myself and go across the plain to the Greeks' hollow ships. There I will plead with this evil man for the body of our son. Perhaps he will be ashamed before his companions and will pity me in my old age, for he himself has a father like me." Andromache, who heard the cries and wailing from the wall while she was at home weaving, reached the wall in time to see Achilles' horses swiftly dragging Hector's body off toward the Greeks' hollow ships. Darkness like night came over her eyes, and she collapsed, tearing from her head the veil that golden Aphrodite had given her on the day she had married Hector. When Andromache regained consciousness, she cried, "Oh, Hector, you have left me in deep grief, myself a widow and our infant son helpless without you. Even if he survives this war, he is now doomed to a hard, sad life, for other men will seize his lands. Once a child becomes an orphan," she continued, "his friends leave him. With a bowed head and tears on his cheeks, he approaches his father's friends, tugging at their coats. The one who pities him will offer him a cup for a moment, enough to wet his lips but not enough to fill his mouth. And a child whose parents still live strikes him and pushes him away from the table, saying, 'Go away, no father of yours is eating with us.' So the needy child tearfully returns to his widowed mother. Poor Astyanax, who has known only the best of love and care." So Andromache spoke, weeping, and all the Trojans wept with her. That night Achilles mourned for Patroclus until he finally fell asleep by the shore of the loud-sounding sea. Then the shade of his dearest friend appeared before him, looking and sounding exactly as he had when he was alive. "You have forgotten me," Patroclus admonished Achilles. "Bury me quickly, so that I may enter the kingdom of Hades. Until you do, the shades will not let me cross the river Styx and join them. You, too, are fated to die beneath the well-defended walls of Priam's city. When that time comes, let our bones lie together in the golden urn with the double handles that your mother gave you." Achilles replied, "I will do just as you wish, dearest friend, but come closer that we may clasp our arms about each other and grieve over our separation." The son of Peleus reached toward Patroclus with his hands, but he could not touch him. Like a mist, the shade of his friend disappeared into the earth. Achilles proceeded to hold the funeral ceremonies and games in honor of Patroclus as he had promised. Many days after the funeral, Achilles still kept the body of Hector unburied by his hollow ships. Whenever he felt the desire, he would attach Hector's body to his chariot, drag it around and around Patroclus's tomb, and then leave it lying face down in the dust. Since Apollo loved Hector even in death, he preserved Hector's corpse from decay and destruction. The god of the silver bow finally prevailed upon his father, Zeus, to convince Hera and Athena that Achilles should not be permitted to have his way with Hector's body. This was not an easy task, for even Hector's death had not softened the hatred that Hera and Athena felt for the Trojans. The insult of Paris's choice of Aphrodite's beauty and gift over their own had not faded with time. Nevertheless, they finally permitted Thetis to counsel her son. When Thetis entered Achilles' hut, he was sitting with his head upon his arms, still mourning for Patroclus. She sat down beside him, stroked his head, and said, "My child, how long will you continue this sorrow? Since your life will be so short, I would like to see you enjoy it. I have come as a messenger from Zeus, Lord of Olympus. All the deathless gods are angry because you have not returned Hector's body for proper burial. Accept the ransom for the dead and give him up." While Thetis was persuading Achilles to return Hector's body, the Lord of Olympus sent swift-footed Iris down to advise King Priam to go alone to Achilles' hut with ample ransom. In order to calm his fears, Hermes, the wayfinder, would be his guide. Great-hearted Priam collected a wondrous array of gifts. As the eternally young god and the old king made their way together across the plain of Troy toward the hollow ships of the Greeks, Hermes reassured Priam that the immortals had protected Hector's body from both the ravages of time and Achilles' harsh treatment. Once they reached Achilles' hut, Hermes took leave of Priam and returned to Mount Olympus. The old king entered the hut, took Achilles by the knees, and said, "Remember your father, godlike Achilles, who, like me, will soon become an old man. While you are alive, his heart is joyful. As for me, although I fathered 50 sons, you and war-loving Ares have killed the best of them. And for none do I mourn as I do for my son Hector, who guarded Troy and its people. I have come to you with numerous gifts as ransom for his body. Pity me, for I am forced to beg the man who killed my valiant sons." Achilles wept in sympathy with Priam in his sorrow. Then the swift-footed son of Peleus asked, "How did you have the courage to come alone to the hollow ships and look into my eyes when I have killed so many of your brave sons? Surely your heart is made of iron." Achilles continued, "The deathless gods spin the threads of mortals' lives to bring them grief, while the gods themselves live free of pain. Zeus, lord of the thunderbolt, sits between two urns, one filled with blessings and the other containing evils. The one to whom Zeus gives only evil gifts is despised both by mortals and by the gods. That man wanders upon the earth searching for honor, but finding none. However, the one to whom Zeus gives gifts from both urns at some times finds good and at other times evil in his life. So it is with you. In the past, the deathless gods gave you great gifts, the blessings of land, wealth, and many fine sons. Now, with this hateful war, the gods have brought evil upon you. The bronze-coated Greeks have killed many of the sons you loved. However, you must endure the pain. A heart overflowing with sorrow will not help you, for grief will not return the dead to life. So come now and sit down. Together we will put an end to our tears." Priam replied, "Do not ask me to sit down while my son Hector lies unburied and away from Troy. Instead, bring him to me immediately so that I can look upon him and accept the great ransom I have brought you." Achilles angrily replied, "Do not incite me to fury, old sir, or I may harm you even while you are a guest inside my hut and, in doing so, anger Zeus. I intend to give your son back to you, for Zeus, Lord of Counsel, sent my mother to advise me. I know in my heart that some god must have led you to my hut. No mortal, no matter how young and strong, would have had the courage to come into the camp of the bronze-coated Greeks, nor could he have done so without arousing the guards." Then Priam became frightened and silent. Achilles, however, leaped forth like a lion, accepted the ransom, and prepared to return the body of Hector to his father. He also agreed to halt the war for 11 days, so that the Trojans could prepare and hold a proper funeral for Hector. He shook the old king's hand to confirm his promise. With Hermes to guide him once again, Priam returned to Troy with Hector's body. Andromache, Hecuba, and Helen led the women in wailing over the death of Hector, recounting his loss to them as husband, son, and dear friend. The gathering of wood for the funeral pyre took 9 days. On the 10th day, as rosy-fingered dawn shone forth, the people of Troy assembled at the pyre. They laid godlike Hector's corpse upon it and set fire to his body. When dawn next gave light to gods and mortals, they quenched the flames, gathered Hector's bones, and put them into a golden urn. They wrapped the urn in purple robes and placed it in a hollow grave. After they had covered the grave with large stones, they built a mound and set a watch upon it to protect from the Greeks. The funeral concluded with a great feast in the palace of King Priam. In this way, the horse-taming Trojans held the funeral of godlike Hector of the shining helm. That's the end of the Iliad. I'm going to read the epilogue, which talks about the Trojan horse and how Achilles dies. So you can keep listening, but the Iliad technically is over at this point. The death of Achilles. With the help of Apollo, Paris killed Achilles at the Scaean gates by shooting an arrow into his heel. A great battle for Achilles' corpse followed. While Odysseus fought off the Trojans, Ajax was able to pick up Achilles' body and, through a shower of Trojan arrows, carry it back to the Greek ships. The Greeks burned the body of Achilles and placed his bones with those of Patroclus, as they both had wished. However, Thetis actually rescued Achilles from the funeral pyre and took him to White Island in the Euxine Sea, where he is immortal. After the funeral games, the Greeks decided to award Achilles' armor to the warrior who had contributed the most to the Greek effort. Odysseus, the best strategist, and Ajax, the best fighter, competed for this prize. Odysseus, with the help of Athena, won the votes of the Greek leaders. Ajax was so humiliated by his defeat that he went insane. Thinking that the Greeks' cattle were the warriors who had voted against him, he killed them. When he realized what he had done, he was so ashamed that he killed himself. The death of Paris. When the Greeks sailed for Troy, Philoctetes accompanied them, carrying the bow that Heracles had given him before he died. At one of their island stops, Philoctetes was bitten by a snake. The wound smelled so terrible that the Greeks left him behind on the island. 10 years later, the prophet Calchas, or the Trojan seer Helenus, whom Odysseus captured, told the Greeks that they needed Heracles' bow in order to defeat the Trojans. So Odysseus and Diomedes returned to the island and brought Philoctetes and the bow to Troy. There his wound was healed, and he shot Paris in single combat. The defeat of Troy. After the death of Paris, his brother Deiphobus married Helen. Odysseus brought Achilles' son Neoptolemus to Troy and gave him his father's armor. Athena taught Epeius to build a great wooden horse, whose body would accommodate the greatest of the Greek warriors. Meanwhile, Odysseus, in the disguise of a beggar, entered Troy. Helen recognized him and plotted with him to capture Troy. However, she later changed her mind and tried to expose the men who were hiding inside the horse. The Greeks left the horse outside the walls of Troy and hid on a nearby island. The Trojans were suspicious of the horse, but when 2 serpents attacked the priest of Apollo, who had warned against accepting a Greek gift, they took it inside. Then, certain that the war had finally ended, they celebrated their great victory. Later that night, while the Trojans slept soundly, the Greeks, who were hiding inside the horse, including Odysseus, Menelaus, and Neoptolemus, disembarked and opened the Trojan gates to the Greek armies, who had secretly returned. The Greeks then looted and burned the great city. Menelaus killed Deiphobus and recovered Helen. The women in Hector's family became enslaved, as he had known would be their fate if Troy lost the war. The greatest Greek warriors were entitled to special prizes of honor, which, now, were the greatest of the Trojan women. Agamemnon claimed Hector's sister Cassandra, who had received but spurned Apollo's love. Odysseus claimed Hecuba. Neoptolemus, who had killed Priam, chose Andromache. Hector's son Astyanax was grabbed from his nurse by either Neoptolemus or Odysseus and thrown to his death, either from a tower or from the Trojan wall.